Okay, it is 10:31 Central Time, so I think we will get started. This is Carolyn from Northwestern. I am facilitating the call today, and Linda Newman has graciously agreed to take notes, and we will be calling upon you guys to step up for the next call, so be thinking about facilitating or note-taking for the next call in March. Because we have a full agenda and a really exciting topic, we are not going to do a normal roll call. It takes too long. Linda already said this, but in case you're just joining, please add your name to the attendees list on the wiki. Do we have any newcomers, though, this time around to the call? No newcomers. Can someone just verify they can hear me?
We can hear you.
I can hear you, Carolyn.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. It's awkward. So I'm standing up though, so I'm gesticulating a lot, and I'm ready to get started. Our first item on the agenda today is not rebranding because we do have some people who need to leave early, and they wanted to give an update about the URI selection working group. So if Julie Hardesty and Karen Estlund, if you guys are on the call, please step in and give us an update.
Hey, Carolyn. Are you on the call? I don't see her listed yet. So I'll dive into this. This is Karen, and I'll make this actually pretty quick. Most of you may be able to see in the agenda that the white paper from the URI Management Working Group is available. And the URI Management Working Group has been working since April of last year, and thanks to Julie and many others on the group. One of the reasons that I really wanted. Can someone mute? I just hear myself echoing. Thanks. All right. So I really wanted to bring this up on a partners call because we're at the stage of reviewing their final recommendations, and this is a fairly significant commitment for the Hydra community because when we're talking about URIs, this is something we actually want to sustain going forward. So I do invite all of you to please make comments on the white paper. A note went out earlier. There is a predicate decision tree document that's linked from this as well that shows you how they envision deciding which predicates will get URIs for this initial step. But I think also most important is the idea that there will be a standing working group to approve these. So this, I think, is really important for partners to be involved in and to take a role here so we make sure the predicates that are chosen are ones that we want. And so this is in part a recruitment call. And if there are any kind of questions at this point, please go ahead and ask. I don't know if Julie's made it on. No questions.
Any
about
questions for Karen?
Yeah. All right.
This is Rick. I think yes. The only thing I would say is I really like what the result of this is with having a formal predicate schema and all of that is really fantastic.
Thanks. Well, and thank you to the group that's done all this work on it. Well, great. Well, we'll be in touch. The call will be going out for that group, and we'll be working on the technologies then. But I wanted to make sure partners were all up and aware of this. So with that, I'll hand it over back to Carolyn for the next topic.
Thanks, Karen. And that link for the working paper, everyone, is in the agenda right now. All right, so our next...
Carolyn,
yep.
This is Linda. Could I interrupt real quick with a question for Karen? Is there anything in terms of timeline when you really need comments that you'd like me to put in the minutes?
Thank you, Linda. If you could have comments by the end of the month, that would be great. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Great. So the next topic is one that's gotten already a lot of discussion online. We will be talking about the rebranding of the Hydra project. And I think Richard is on the call from the steering group and was going to lead this discussion for us.
Richard is, and he will lead it if there's no one else who wants to do so. I don't know who the calling users are.
Richard, Deborah's on the phone, and I can, Deborah Kurtz from Duraspace. I've been talking with the attorneys. I can help as needed, facilitate that conversation.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. Okay, then. Really, what I probably should just do by way of introduction is to restate the information that I sent out in an email on behalf of Steering a few days ago. As you will know, as partners, the Hydra project has been looking at trademarking both the name and the logo in the US and Canada and Europe for quite some time, and indeed the funding to do that was the focus of our fundraising efforts, 2 years ago now, nearly. That's been ticking along nicely, but fairly late in the process we became aware of a company in Germany called MPDV, which it turns out has a trademark on the use of the word Hydra going back to, I think from memory, 1996, but whatever, it well predates ours. And the scope of that trademark is hugely wide-ranging. Basically, it says computer software. Our trademark attorney has had quite a bit of toing and froing with MPDV's lawyers, and because MPDV's interest is in control software, quite different from the repository software that we know and love, we tried to reach a mutual coexistence agreement, but MPDV basically just weren't having it, and eventually said, no, we require you to cease the use of the word Hydra, otherwise we will prosecute. And after a bit of further discussion, they offered us a period of 6 months, because we're essentially a non-profit, in which to make that transformation. And our advice from the trademark attorney is that 6 months is generous. We didn't take that at face value. John Dunn, who you know from Indiana, offered to take the whole thing to Indiana's council for a second opinion. They agreed with our lawyers that we just couldn't win this one. Even if we decided to face it, we would just end up with a very big bill, and at the end of the day we'd lose. So we have, in the last few days, written to MPDV's, or at least our attorney has written to MPDV's lawyers, saying we will agree to their requirements, and we are starting, as we all know, on a process of rebranding. Now, things are still very new. Deborah, who we've just heard is on the phone, thanks Deborah, has just got away from the latest discussion with our lawyers to understand exactly what the scope of this prohibition is. For instance, okay, we stop the use of Hydra, but does that mean we have to stop Haiku and Hyrax and things like that? We suspect not. But Deborah, do you want to chip in at that point?
Yeah, I think the big concern with MPDV is that we abandoned the trademark and we agreed to rebrand Hydra, and which we've done. And so our attorneys have encouraged us to keep up the momentum, to select a new name, and they are going to continue to represent us. So if we choose, when we choose a new name, they'll file the trademark for us. There will be no new attorney fees. They will do. More importantly, they'll conduct a full search so we can be certain that that there aren't any, whatever our new name is out there, that we won't run into this issue again. And so the main concern of MPDV, the German company, was that we do those two things, which we've done. So there's no follow-up. We want to make sure that we rebrand, think big picture, rename the communications and documentation that we have most direct control, so the website, and then perhaps moving on to the social media site. I shared with him a document that Carrot Eslin has started for us to think broadly about the rebrand, where everything changes, and that the name itself, the rebranding, will kind of happen organically to kind of these lower level documentations as we continue to use our new name. And so it was we have honored what we agreed to do in the first place. That said, in 6 months, if we didn't have our website changed, we would put ourselves at risk. So they encourage us to keep up momentum, to select a new name, and they'll help with the search again and with the trademark. And we should just really focus on pieces, again, over which we have the most direct control, that are the most public-facing. So the hardest part is really selecting the new name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Deborah.
Sure.
So, as Deborah says, steering has already put together what turns out to be quite a big document about all the places that the name touches that we're going to have to look at in due course. But clearly, the urgent thing, or the most urgent thing on that list, is to find a new name. There has already been a lot of discussion among the steering group, as you might imagine. You'll have seen a lot of discussion on the partner list. You may be aware of quite a lot of discussion on the Slack channel. Tom put together a new channel called, just tell me someone, rebranding, branding.
I think it's rebranding.
No, it's branding, actually, because I've got it on the window here.
Richard, could you confirm, this is Robin, could you confirm that the criteria that Tom had talked about, is that along in that Slack channel?
Possibly not, but can I just sort of go through what I wanted to say, and then we can pick up all these bits. So as I say, steering has started the process. We wanted to take this opportunity to discuss it with you, the partners, today, before we made a public announcement. In the last half hour, I've just drafted something that may go out to other lists next week once colleagues on the steering group have looked at it, so that everything is then out in the open. But as far as the process is concerned, we want to see, and we hope you will agree with this, we want to see this not as a setback, but as a chance to refocus and reinvigorate what we currently call the Hydra project ahead of a number of new exciting developments and initiatives such as Highbox and cloud delivery and all that sort of thing. And we would like to get this in place, basically in place, before open repositories in Australia, which from memory is the end of June. So that's actually a month inside the 6 months. Might be a few bits still to do at that point, but that we think would be a very good point in time to have a major push relaunching what we are. So, for you, the partners, advice, please. Clearly, we've already received advice from a number of you that this is perhaps not something we should undertake ourselves, the deciding on the new name, but it might be wise to involve a company that has expertise in this, and we shall certainly consider that. We're going to ask the community to pitch in as well with any ideas they have. And what steering has decided to recommend is that there be two, project managers, coordinators, think of a name, it really matters not what. One to oversee all the changes that need to be done to the, for want of a better term, admin and management side of things, and one to oversee all the changes that might need doing on the, again, for want of a better term, the code or developer side of things. Clearly those two people would work together. If you'll have me, I have volunteered to do the admin management side, but we would very much welcome volunteers preferably from within the partners, from someone who has the time, which could be quite a bit of time, let's be honest, to take a close look at the code and developer side of things, where I don't have nearly the expertise that job will require. Tom, on the partner list, coming back to Robin's point, had come up with a list of criteria that the Highbox team used when they were looking for a name for the Highbox product. I haven't seen them on the Slack channel, though I haven't gone right back to its beginnings. If they're not, we can easily post those there. But I think at that stage, unless Robin or Deborah or any of the other steerers who may be on the call want to chip in, I'd be happy to open the floor to you for comments, suggestions, discussion, whatever.
This is Karen. I just wanted to mention briefly that we don't have clarification on how deep the code changes need to be. It could be as simple as just the descriptions on GitHub, since that's where the main branding parts are. So the technical side actually might not be as deep as we are thinking.
So, and just from a legal, perspective, the way that Eric said, that our attorney described things, is that they would expect for the code to, the naming to kind of evolve as we update the code. So, we're not responsible for anything retroactively, but as there are new code releases, to begin to use the new brand in them, and that eventually the change will pervade across all the code, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. So what we're saying is they're not. Thankfully, it would seem that they're not going to try and they're not going to ask us to try and rewrite history and pretend that the Hydra project never existed.
Exactly.
They just want us to move away from it going forwards.
Yes.
I've stunned you all into silence.
So, Richard, since people are thinking, hopefully they're thinking, I have a question and I'm sorry we were late, I was on the wrong line, but about the MOU, I know that'll fall into the administrative side. Again, with that condition of changing things as we move forward, obviously we would need to get new language for any new people coming on board, but will we also have to go back and get people to re-sign the MOU from all of the existing member institutions?
I hope not.
No.
Well, can I just finish, Deborah?
Sure,
I've looked at both the MOU language and the CLA language. The CLA language is fine. We're certainly not going to have to redo the CLAs because the CLA specifically talks about Hydra or its successor in interest. So fine, that takes care of that. That phraseology is not in the MOU. But the MOU is problematic from a number of other aspects, and I don't want to make a snap judgment here. That is one that we do need to look at. But clearly, if we can avoid having to go back to partner institutions to get that re-signed, we will do. But it's not as straightforward as the CLA situation.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering if people on the call don't feel that they can themselves take on this other piece. Is there anybody willing, do they know of other people in the community that would make good candidates that they could actually recommend?
This is Linda, and I should start by saying I'm not volunteering, but it seems that we don't have strategy in place for how we will find the name, other than this possible suggestion of working with a branding firm. I've seen a lot of suggestions, some serious, some not, on the Slack channel. But I wonder if we need a strategy for how we think we will brainstorm and come up with a name, one that reflects our values and aspirations, of course. And I think the criteria that Tom laid out are great. I also think that the suggestion that a couple people on I+1 that was valid, that we might want to think longer term about whether the name for the product, which we're forced to immediately, as fast as possible, come up with something new, is necessarily the same thing as the name for our community. And I think there's some value in considering that.
Just if I should, sorry. And Linda, I was just going to say, I think the development of a process is something that I think we've talked about and are thinking about. I think part of the reason of this conversation, and Richard or Deborah jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, was to sort of broaden the discussion about, is there anyone in the community who has experience in this kind of activity? If we had some community resources to help sort of shepherd that process, then we might look to them to help build that process. And if not, that's, I think, where we're thinking that some outside assistance might be useful, and where we might look at an outside resource to be hired to help us manage and design that process for feedback and input.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah, I think, though, Linda, your point about considering a distinction between the project and the product names is certainly something we should look at very seriously. A number of people have actually brought that up in various places, and I think you're absolutely right.
So this is Aviva. I have a question about actually hiring an external firm for rebranding. We have a marketing team in-house we could talk to. Are we actually talking about hiring a consultant? Is this something that maybe you want to talk to some of the partner institutes to see if we have teams in-house that might be able to help with some rebranding?
At the moment, Aviva, as Mark said, we're exploring options. So if you're making that offer...
I'm making the offer to at least talk to my marketing team about it. I'm not promising that we'd be able to do it.
No, sure. Well, perhaps you would do that, and perhaps others on the call might be in a position to do the same thing.
Okay.
And drop steering an email if things look as if they're getting serious.
Great.
Yeah, there's a possibility that our marketing crew would also be interested, and then there's another firm in town called Convoy who used to do a lot of development. Now they do more branding and iconography and that sort of thing. And I know one of the partners well, so I could also explore at least what it might cost for their firm to do something for us.
As I said, at the moment, all options should be explored. If I didn't make it clear in my introduction, we only agreed a matter of days ago that we were going to go this route, so things are still very new.
Richard, this is Carolyn. Or everyone, we have about 5 more minutes that we can spend on this topic. We do have a little more, but people don't seem very talkative, so I'm going to say 5 minutes and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so this is Rick. I think one thing that I would say is if we do involve a consultant, that I would hope that it would include some kind of feedback mechanism from the community in terms of reviewing as well as generating possible nuances or ideas for that. Just to try to make sure we can try to keep the spirit of it, and but I guess the main thing would be trying to make sure it stays efficient enough where we're not slowing down the process where then we're in trouble in terms of meeting our deadline. So.
Yeah, we're certainly not in the game of trying to impose a name on everyone. We want it to be certainly a partner decision and preferably a community decision at the end of the day. But getting the name sorted out is something that we need to do fairly quickly, because not a lot else can be done until we have the name to work with, or names, if it's a product and a community. There's not a lot we can do until we have those.
So that said, I wonder if like one first step might be just to set a first deadline for feedback from the community. That could be a fairly quick turnaround, just to get people moving on any ideas they might have.
Certainly an idea.
This is Karen, and maybe seconding that thought, if we really want to implement everything by open repositories, we should probably set a deadline by which we want a new name, and that will also help partners and others on the call know when they talk to their marketing folks if it's actually within their time schedules as well. And Viv and I are making eye contact here, and we're thinking maybe end of March, early April.
I'm thinking April 1 is probably the best day for us to start saying that that's what we would want. I think, that gives us an opportunity to potentially have some things in front of the community to look at. It's a relatively tight timeline, but I think working with a firm, it wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility to get some stuff by then.
Do we want to have the legal review of the options before then, or once we've selected something? That's something also to factor into the timeline.
Yeah, I think
search.
I think that makes sense. We want to learn from experience, so I think that makes sense. Those pieces go fairly quickly. And I can get exact timelines or estimates for you for the search after this call.
I think we would want the search done by April 1st if we're going to change all the documentation by open repositories.
I would suggest bringing it forward a few days so that we knew where we stood come the partner meeting in Stanford, which is 30th and 31st of March from memory.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, and realistically, the most of the time, I mean, if you're looking at this from a project management perspective and you've only got 6 months to comply, really the things that are going to take the most time is, changing all the documentation, the administrative side of things, and what we have to do on the code side. So we want to give ourselves plenty of room to take care of those.
This is Linda. There's also a graphic component. I mean, we have the dragon and the Hydra and the image some of us call the Hydra, and perhaps some of those graphic elements will tie into the new name, or perhaps they won't. But in either case, I assume we want an actual logo, not just a text name.
Oh yeah.
And that's where I think I know design can move fast, but it can also move slow. So.
This is Anders. I just suggest regarding the timeline that it might be a help to talk to the lawyers and clarify what are the actual real urgent things for this German company to accept compliance with agreement. I would doubt that they would start looking into our code and stuff to check if we've changed things. So there might be a sort of list priority for what are the real urgent things to have ready by 6 months.
Yeah, this is Deborah. Once again, we have complied. We have done that. We've agreed to the rebrand, and we have surrendered the trademark. So the most important thing is to, as we move forward with the rebrand, is to name the things over which we have the most direct control. So in 6 months, if we have a new name and perhaps logo on the website and on our formal communications, again, not worried so much about the MOU or the other licenses, we will have complied. There's no checkup there necessarily. I think that however, in 6 months, if we were still using Hydra, and they have set legal precedents. But just the fact that we've agreed to this rebrand, certainly if we have some names and can show that we've been making progress. Again, the name, a change on the name, and team change, on the website should be enough in 6 months to do that, and showing forward motion, calling ourselves new project, whatever. So there's no, we have honored everything legally right now, as long as we go forward with the name change.
And whilst I don't, sorry.
Could I ask, and I won't put this in the minutes, what we mean by 6 months? Is it August 1st?
No, can I just say, Linda, which sort of will answer your question, whilst I don't disagree with anything that Deborah has just said, there would be a lot of win for the project, whatever it's called. Indeed, if it's even called a project, then, we might want to change to something foundation, or, this is all for discussion. There would be a big win for us to have this all sorted out in time for open repositories, so that presentations there could be done in the name of the new entity, that the specialist track day was done in the name of the new entity, and so on. And that's about 5 months out. So we need, as we were saying a few minutes ago, we need the name, and yes, certainly end of March for the partner meeting would be a reasonable timescale, I think. And then everything can flow from that. We do the very urgent, very public things like the website and the wiki quickly. The detail we can take a little longer over. But actually, I think if we have the name by the end of March, we probably can get most of this work done by the end of June, which is well inside their 6 months.
I agree with all of that.
This is Carolyn. I had an idea about process for picking the new name, but is the steering group owning that process, or we could put together a working group, since that seems like a very, working group, figure out the process, involve the community, help us choose a couple of options for a new name, so that then we can go get the legal review for them. That was just my thought.
That's an option, and I wouldn't say, no, it's a bad idea. I think we steering would like a little longer to think about the entire process. As I say, this is all really very new, and we need to think our way through it. And my gut feeling, this is my personal gut feeling now, not a steering feeling, is that it might be better done in the open on the partner list, so that everyone feels they've got a say, rather than giving it to a few people on a working group. But we can discuss that.
I didn't mean the working group decides. I meant the working group would just, be the people who are actually like creating the surveys, putting together the spreadsheets or whatever, figuring out the ways to collect the ideas for the names, and then generating, voting or whatever. That, I mean, the actual process, not that they'd be the decision makers.
Okay. As I say, please could we have a few days just to get our heads around all this? We'll get back to you.
So it is 11:05. Do we want to move on, or do people still want to talk about this? It seems like Hall was and Richard and Chris were agreeable to doing the Archivematica show and tell, or just tell, I guess, on the next agenda, if we still want to keep talking about this. All right, I'm gonna think silence is that we should move on. So, Richard and Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about your work with Archivematica?
Is Chris actually on the call?
Oh, maybe not.
Yeah, right. Okay, I can talk about Archivematica. Let me just pull up the email that I sent to the partner list earlier. Yeah, okay. some of you are aware from presentations that we've done at Open Repositories and Hydra Connect and various other places, that Hull has been involved with York University in looking at the possibility of integrating Archivematica into a Hydra workflow, so that the Hydra workflow in totality dealt with preservation properly, quote unquote. So it wasn't just a question of putting stuff safe in the repository, but actually there was a genuine archival package stored somewhere safe for the longer term. Now, we were lucky enough to get a grant between York and Hull from JISC to look at this in the context of research data specifically, and some of you will have seen the outputs of that, and I know we're following the blog and that sort of thing. But it was always our view in Hull that whatever we decided for research data needed to be applicable to all our repository content. I mean, we don't just want to archive research data necessarily. There are some other things that we consider valuable enough that we'd want to archive them too. So we were looking at a general purpose workflow. And what we've come up with, I'll describe in a second, but basically we've been working with a company called Cottage Labs that some of you know in England, largely because we're still without a dedicated developer in Hull. And they have put together for us a proof of concept system, and I announced on the partner list, perhaps even the community list, back in the fall, that they had that working, and we were pretty pleased with it, as we were. Then we tried to transfer it to Hull's infrastructure. And to cut a long story short, it's taken us between 2 and 3 months. All sorts of problems in all sorts of areas, not particularly with the software so much as architectures in Hull and, yeah, well, let's not talk about ITCD departments. Anyway, we have it working. We have a very fragile system working, which as far as we're concerned demonstrates that the proof of concept is valid, and we are now going to look at taking that forward into a production system, not for research data, but actually for something called the City of Culture. The UK has this thing that every 4 years one of the major cities is identified as the City of Culture, and it becomes the focus for all sorts of cultural events during that year. That is Hull in 2017, and the university agreed to archive the whole kit and caboodle. So that's not just the crowdsourced photographs, videos potentially, but more importantly, from a research point of view, all the documentation and background work that went into putting the project together and so on, in the hope that other people can learn from that going on. So we actually need a production quality archive for all that material, and that's where we're going to use this proof of concept. It will deliberately be a total clone of our university digital repository, so that they're using exactly the same architectures and software. That is all at the moment Fedora 3 based, and that's a very deliberate decision, so that when we move forward to Fedora 4 at some point in the future, the migration work is the same for both systems. Now, originally we'd intended to show you a screencast that I put together for the team. It was never intended to go public, but Carolyn advised me that screencasts don't necessarily work terribly well on WebEx, so I have put an email out to the partner list with a link where you can download that video. It's about 72 megabytes and just shy of 8 minutes long. It's unedited, it is what it is, but it does show the system working. Essentially what we do is that users who want to deposit, make an archival deposit, let's put it that way, can assemble all the material in a box folder. Think Dropbox, it's the same sort of technology, except that all Hull's students and staff have an institutional box account that they can use. Goes in there, when they're happy, they put in either a description.txt or a description.csv file, depending whether they're creating a single object or it's essentially a batch ingest. And the first bit of our software creates a submission information package which Archivematica understands. That's then transferred to a fully automated Archivematica process which ends up producing the archival information package, which is to OAIS specs, and that will go into an archival store. But it also produces a dissemination information package which we push towards the repository workflow. We then parse that DIP and feed the information from it into our existing Hydra workflow using the same endpoints, and that then automatically creates an object in the quality assurance queue of the repository where library staff can look at it, check the metadata, enhance it, just pretty the whole thing up if that was what it needs, and assign permissions to it. Essentially that's working. The one bit that isn't working, well, two bits actually that aren't working. A third option for deposit would be to effectively deposit a folder, and the folder has a structure to it which is important to the user, in which case the plan is to zip that up and make an object and an archival information package that contains the zip of that structure. We didn't even attempt to do that in the proof of concept, but we don't see it as a particularly difficult problem. The other thing is that if you run the screencast, you'll see that two areas of the automatic processing fail. A file identification process in the first bit and then normalization in the second bit, which depends on file identification. In the commentary, I say, oh dear, the file identification doesn't seem to be working. We need to check that. We know it does work under other circumstances. We've had it working, but subsequent checking on it, not noted in the video, we find that the file identification is working fine. It's just not being passed back properly. So there's probably a typo in an argument or something. So we're not bothered about that. But anyway, the video is there for you to look at. I'm happy to answer questions about it if we have the time. But as I say, 8 minutes video if you're interested.
Are there any questions for Richard?
Hi, this is Anders. I'd like to ask a question, Richard. The data flow between your repository and Archivematica, are you using some sort of standardized APIs, or is that proprietary endpoints, or how is that?
We have a long-standing workflow using web interfaces for depositing material in the repository. Many of you have seen it demonstrated in various places. What we did, and I think what we are going to do in the production system, is we took apart the dissemination information package, extracted all the bits of metadata that we wanted and the file information and so on, and basically fed it to the same endpoints in the web-based deposit system that we've been using. So all the construction of the Hydra object is using tried and tested mechanisms that we've been using now for several years, but just driven from a screen rather than from this piece of software. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it doesn't quite answer my. It was also when you push data onto the archival packages onto Archivematica. Is that what I was thinking a little bit? Is this solution Archivematica specific, or is it somehow?
Sorry, you're talking about getting the data into the front end, into Archivematica.
Yeah.
Right. The system builds a bag, basically, as in bag it, with all that implies for information about checksums and fixity and you know. So yes, it is to a standard, and Archivematica's ingest process understands bags.
Thank you.
I'm going to step in here because it's 11:15 Central Time now, and I do know we have a few calendar events and announcements coming up. So if you have questions for Richard, you can contact him off the list. Will, are you here from IU to talk about the hackathon event?
Yes, I am.
Perfect.
So basically for the Project Hydra Dam 2, which is an NEH grant that Indiana University and WGBH Boston are working on together, part of that grant is that we would have a hackathon in order to work with the Hydra and Fedora community to extend some of the work that we've been doing on this into a larger area. And what we've been thinking would be a good topic for us to be working on this is asynchronous storage. And we've already done some pretty extensive work with how we could set up an architecture that would support asynchronous storage. We put together a prototype that does that, but we still need some further work and ideas in that area in terms of exactly what types and how the architecture we've put together would communicate with other cloud storage systems or other storage that would require asynchronous. For us, our system that requires us to do this is tape-based, so the response time can be very slow on that. So we need some further help on enhancing the API that would go into our asynchronous storage proxy, and then we are also thinking that it would be good on the Hydra side to be able to develop the client side of that. What is the code that you would need to have in place to be able to do that? Whether that is code that becomes part of a gem or an API or a generator, I'm not sure, and that's part of what we want to work with the Hydra community to see how this might fit into the newer architectures that are happening within the Hydra. And I'm just now thinking how long it's going to take me to stop saying Hydra and say some other word at that point in time. It's going to take me a while. So at any rate, what we're hoping then is that there might be partners out there who are interested in this issue of asynchronous storage and who would be willing to send people to a hackathon if we had one, and we could then develop along this whole line of coordinating some of the work in Fedora and Hydra and these external storage systems. So if you are interested in doing that, you can contact me at my email address, wgcowan@iu.edu.
And this is John Dunn from Indiana. Sorry, just to add one thing to that. We do have some funds on the NEH grant that can potentially help to support travel for participants to such an event.
All right.
Yeah,
thank you, guys. Oh,
question? I have a quick
Sorry.
question. Yeah, this is Rick. So did you have I may have missed it, but did you have a particular date in mind for that kind of hackathon?
We don't. As a matter of fact, we want to work with some of the partners. If there is interest in this, we want to work with some of the partners to find that, and potentially even hook it on to other events, maybe as soon as the end of March with the events in Stanford, and I think there's going to be a Developers Congress there that we might be able to hook into, some other things like that. So if we can get some interest, and it looks like we're going to be able to pull in some people that might want to work on this, then we can kind of really solidify what exactly the best way to do that, whether it's to attach it to something or develop one of our own. But we're certainly looking to have something done by this summer. So we're not looking for this to push into a longer period of time than that.
Okay, yeah, because at Nerd Am we were actually talking about this this week about whether it would make sense to look and see if there's anything to extract from some of the work we had done as well to integrate into this.
Right.
So yeah. Okay. All right, I will follow up after offline here.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Are there
That's
any
all for me,
other?
then.
Thanks, Will. Are there any other announcements? There weren't. There wasn't much listed in the wiki ahead of time, but are there any announcements or events people want to plug briefly in the last few minutes of the call?
Yes, actually, Mark is unmuting himself, but I know that we also wanted to talk about the Advanced Hydra Camp and Hydra Camp that DC is offering. So I'll turn that over to Mark.
Great.
Thank you, Shanita. So I just wanted to put a shout out that Shanita and I are putting together a partner update that will note that we have a Hydra Camp scheduled at Emory University in April, and then we'll be hosting our first ever Advanced Hydra Camp in May here in Minneapolis. So we'll have details of that in the partner update that we send out, as well as we'll be sending out a more general notification to the community list, the tech list, and some of the other library tech community lists early next week. So just wanted to put a plug in for those two.
And this is Aviva. I wanted to send out a reminder in case people haven't read on the list. Northwestern is going to be hosting Hydra, not Hydra Connect this year. That is what I'm calling it internally. You guys can call it whatever you want, I guess. It will be November 6th through 9th at the Hilton Orrington, right on the Evanston campus. We have a little bit of information up on the wiki, but not a whole lot. Registration is not yet open. Hotel registration is not yet open, but we will keep you posted as things develop. Thanks.
Okay, we're getting to well, we have 5 minutes left, but I wanted to see if anyone right now on the call is ready to take that plunge into the pool and be the facilitator next time, and someone for note taker. Do we have any volunteers? And I'm specifically wondering if there are some partners out there who have never done either of those things. If you guys would be willing to jump in and do this, it's quite easy. Facilitation is easy. Note taking's easy. Don't be scared. It'd be great if we could get at least a facilitator right now so that we don't come to the March call and forget that no one volunteered to facilitate. Anyone willing to facilitate?
Linda, this is Deborah at Aerospace. I'll facilitate.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Sure.
This is James Griffin.
Okay.
I can take notes.
Oh, excellent. James Griffin, thank you so much. That is great. All right. Well, we're coming to the end of the call. Thanks, everyone, so much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.